As I discovered on a visit to the tiny English Channel island not long ago, Sark is different. For a start, the road signs aren't in miles, but in walking times. Logical enough, since the only motorised vehicles allowed are tractors. Otherwise, if you don't walk, you go by bicycle, or, as Sarkies have done for hundreds of years, by horse and cart.
On a busy day, probably have about 18 carriages on the road.
There's no state health service, social security or pensions, and taxes are tiny since there's no civil service to pay for. Until this year, Sark was Europe's last bastion of feudalism, run by a seigneur, a sort of lord of the manor who leases the 3-mile, 5-kilometre-long island from Britain's queen. Its parliament, called the Chief Pleas, used to be dominated by 40 major landowners. But all that changed when the reclusive billionaire Berkeley twins, Sir David and Sir Frederick, owners of Britain's Daily Telegraph and of London's Ritz Hotel, bought the adjoining islet of Brecqhou and built themselves a fairy tale castle there. Disliking Sark's system of forcing landowners to leave their property to the eldest son, they challenged it in the European Court. Human rights pressures followed, and last week Sark held its first one-person, one-vote election for Chief Pleas. Some former tenants, as the Parliament members were called, approved of the change.
This is really the first time that the Sark residents have had the chance to really take charge of Sark's future with a wholly elected legislature.
Just one snag, it seems, for the Berkeleys. Using a local news sheet, they made clear which of the 57 candidates they approved and which they wanted to see rejected. The contest became a bitterly divisive one.
There's been a lot of intimidation in this election.
And the Sarkies roundly rejected the bulk of the candidates blessed by the Berkeleys, mostly electing traditionalists instead. Now the billionaire brothers, who've invested significantly on Sark and boosted its economic activity, say they feel unwelcome. So they're going to pull their $7 million a year investment and lay off more than 100 workers in their local businesses. Democracy, it seems, is coming at a price for the inhabitants of Sark. Robin Oakley, CNN, London.